Hello friends, Jenkins Dota here, bringing you another Dota 2 video on behalf of DotaAlchemy.com, and this video is going to be on what to do when somebody takes your role in a game of Dota. So a lot of the time in Dota, people will take your role. Sometimes it's for very reasonable reasons, such as somebody being far higher rated than you are, and sometimes it's for very unreasonable reasons, such as somebody rage randoming Rubik and insisting on going carry. In any case, these games are absolutely winnable. In fact, these games are usually the ones that, if you can win, will result in you having a positive increase in your MMR over a short to medium period of queuing. If you lose these games, you'll usually sit at about a 50% or below 50% win rate. These are essentially the hard games that you're not necessarily supposed to win, but if you can, you will be above that 50% win rate, which is enough to gain MMR. So these ones are obviously incredibly important to win, and therefore it's important to have a strategy for picking in games like this. So what do you do if somebody takes your role? Of course, the obvious answer to this is to just pick another role. So what are some strategies for picking other roles without just losing the game because you're in some uncomfortable ass game of Dota you don't know what you're doing? Strategy number 1. Pick another role, but play a hero that can play both in your main role and then that role as well. For me, I'm an offlaner, so in each patch, I like to keep a list of heroes that can be played both in, the mid lane, maybe support role, and then also in the offlane role, just in case I need to fill some other role in one of my games. The benefit to this is that you don't actually have to learn the other roles, or at least you don't have to learn too much about them. If you're capable of learning a bunch of roles in Dota and staying up to date with all of the current meta stuff and all the new information for those roles, then go for it. If that's your learning style, then that just means you're super smart, but that's not for me. Personally, I don't find that it's possible, simply because there's too much information that I have to remember. And I do genuinely think that for competitive reasons, having a baseline understanding of each role is important. I'm not saying that it's not. But realistically, you don't need to know how to win a matchup between Broodmother versus an Ember plus Lich lane on the mid lane unless, that's actually a current lane that people are doing and you are a mid player. The main issue is that if you want to be truly competitive on a role, then you can't just learn it and then kick ass at it for the rest of time. Roles change. In Dota, there's patches. Even without patches, the meta is constantly changing. There's constantly new trends that if you're not keeping up with them in your current role, you're going to start losing. Roles change as well. There's always new information that you need to learn. In my opinion, there are simply too many specifics to remember at any given point in Dota, unless you're extremely gifted in that sense at learning every single role. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't play other roles. In fact, it's actually quite easy to play other roles, as long as you do it correctly. Zeus, for example, is a hero who has played almost identically as an offlaner as he has played in the mid role. So for learning Zeus as an offlaner and playing at mid, the only new information that I needed to learn is how to play the laning phase, and even that is relatively similar to the offlane. So if you can play Zeus in the offlane and you're also looking to dabble in the mid role, then also look to play Zeus in the mid role, because you won't be adding any extra work to your plate in terms of learning the hero and learning the game. Whereas if you want to learn something like a TA mid, and you also want to learn Zeus offlane, then that's obviously two completely different heroes and roles that you're going to have to learn that are so different from each other. Some great heroes that I like to play in different roles that are very similar to their offlane counterparts are Necrophos as carry, because it's basically the exact same thing except you have a way easier lane. Zeus or Timbersaw as a mid laner. Once again, it's very similar to offlane, except your lane is a lot easier. You get way more experience. And then Ogre as support, either as a 5 or 4, because you do the exact same thing as an offlaner as you do a support. You just run in, tank up, try to soak as many spells as possible. And honestly, it's arguably easier as a support because your life doesn't even matter as much as if you were an offlaner. And this hero is really good right now because if you know how to play Ogre, you're essentially a very versatile player, which is kind of ridiculous, but that's the broken thing about learning heroes that can play multiple roles, is that it makes you versatile. On top of this, I have a few heroes that I play exclusively in other roles, but that's only because I really enjoy playing those heroes, and to be totally honest, as a result, I probably know less about the offlane. But that's okay, because I really enjoy playing these heroes. Tinker is a great example of a hero that is my go-to mid laner, but can't really be played in other roles, and I just kind of play him because I really enjoy it. Strategy number 2. pick another role and play a really easy but strong hero in that role. One problem that I always run into is sometimes I'll queue into very high-rated games where somebody is much, much higher rated than I am and they want to take the offlane. Snaking, for example, is a player who I've played with quite a bit recently, and every game, of course, I'm going to give him offlane because I know it's his comfort role, and he's about 1,000 MMR above me, so it would be absolutely insane to try and take that role from him. The problem that occurs in a game like this, however, is that it usually leaves me in the middle lane versus somebody who is much more well-versed in the mid lane than I am. Usually, the enemy team's snaking equivalent player is on the mid role. So if I pick some typical 1v1 mid hero, let's say some like Quap versus Puck lane, chances are I'm going to lose that lane horribly and probably lose the game because the enemy mid laner has done it so many more times than I have and far more recently. And I know this sounds a tad defeatist, but I personally don't think it's reasonable at all to expect myself to be able to crush a player who's extremely high rated and way higher rated than I am in a role that I'm not even remotely comfortable with. If we're talking offlane, sure, put me against anybody. I'm confident I'll do fine because that's my role. But mid, there's too much that I don't know. I don't know what it is that I don't know because I don't know it, but I know from experience that there's probably so much that I don't know about this role. So what I do in a scenario like this is I'll pick a hero that's extremely easy to win the lane with and a hero that's very easy to play. Some heroes have this strength. It's part of Dota. Sure, they will usually be balanced around the fact that they're not going to be utterly broken, but I know that if I pick one of these heroes, I'll be far better off than if I try to outskill my opponent. Zeus and Tinker are my go-to mid laners right now when I want to pick like this, because the worst case scenario is that they just both push out the lane and get every last hit, and then go jungle or gank. No outskilling necessary. Zeus pushes out using the Arc Lightning, and then he gets a bunch of last hits, and he can go gank. Tinker does the exact same thing with March of the Machines. No skill necessary. It's very simple. Strategy number 3. Have fallback heroes prepared on the other roles. The best way to implement this strategy is to just come up with a list of heroes that you really, really enjoy playing in the other roles, and try to stay up to date with them. For me, Pudge is one of my go-to fallbacks. Is he an offlaner? No, absolutely not. But I really enjoyed playing him. And I like him enough that I'm perfectly fine investing time and learning what people are doing on Pudge in the current meta. I also like him enough that if I play him in a game, I will almost always be motivated to win because I'll always be having fun in the game. So even if I'm in a scenario where I'm uncomfortable because it's not my role, I'll be perfectly fine with going late game at a disadvantage because I fucked up the early game on an uncomfortable role, simply because I'm usually enjoying the game enough to actually look forward to coming back with some sick late game hook. The most important thing about these fallback heroes is that you keep note of what your fallback heroes actually are. Don't just try to come up with it on the spot. Sometimes you think you can play a hero and you really can't, and it will become abundantly clear after a few games how little you actually know about a hero. And sometimes it's enough that you should just take the hero out of your repertoire for a while until you watch some replays for that hero. It's also important that you very seldom venture out of this list of heroes that you're building and keep it small. This goes back to the argument that there's simply too much information that you need to keep track of in Dota at any given time in a meta to be truly strong on a certain hero. So the less heroes, the better. Remember that this is your backup list, not your main list of heroes, because it's not your role. So don't get overzealous and think you can play everything, or it'll result in a lot of lost games, and then you'll eventually come to this realization anyway, but at the cost of MMR. One final note that I want to make before ending this video is that these picking strategies are absolutely not mutually exclusive. In fact, you'll have the highest chance of winning if you can combine all three of these into a single pick. To give an example, which is personal to me, Zeus is a hero that combines all three strategies. It's a hero that I thoroughly enjoy, it's very easy to win lanes with, and it can be played in many of the roles as well as my main role. Find these heroes and pick the living shit out of them, because you'll win so much more MMR if you do.